In this lesson, we're going to talk about for loops. So along with while loops, these are two of our looping structures that will iterate through code blocks and control the flow of our program. And again, we're going to be working within our loops package here for the Java Fundamentals project. And let's create a new class called forLoop demo. Use our main method, and we'll hit finish. So we're going to bring some code over here and play around with it within our demo. And the first piece of code we're going to look at is this while loop that we started with in the first lesson on while loops. So we're going to do Control-C to copy it, Control-V to paste that code. And what I'm going to do is just separate the variable count equal to 1. Well, we can leave that all together there. And we can take a look at that code, and that will have us answer those three questions. Where are we starting? Count is 1. Where are we ending? Count is 10. And how do we get there? Count plus plus. And this shows us the values of 1 through 10. So we can do the same thing with a for loop. And a for loop will handle those three questions. Where are we starting? Where are we ending? And how do we get there? Right inside of these parentheses here. So it's all going to be done on one line. So we'll do count equal to 1. And we will do a semicolon there to separate that. Count less than or equal to 10. Count plus plus. Now I'm going to comment this out because we've already declared a count variable here, so I'm getting an error on this one. So I'm just going to do my control / there to make sure that code's not seen. And basically this is taking care of 3 lines of code in our top example in our while loop, all within one line here. And what we have is a variable that starts at a position, ends at a position, and how do we get there? Count plus plus. We're going to separate each of these items with a semicolon. We can do our print line statement. And concatenate our count variable on that. And we're going to get the same result that we saw in the while loop demo of 1 through 10. So that's a for loop. It could be a matter of preference in these two situations on which one you want to use. A for loop tends to be a lot cleaner and it's a lot more popular for structures like this. Actually, if you know the starting and ending point of your loop structure, it is very convenient to use a for loop. While loops are really good if you don't exactly know, like in a game loop, where your code may end. It might depend on some user input. In those situations, while loops are really popular. So this will kind of break down what we just looked at there inside of Eclipse. You've got the initialize of count happening there in the first section of your for condition. And you can see how it relates there with the while loop. There is our condition and where it's going to shut off. It's pretty much, you can see a lot of similarities there between your for loop and your while loop. And then look at the location in the while loop of where your increment for count was located, sort of at the bottom of that loop structure where it's the last part of that for loop condition that you see there in between the parentheses. Nice standard pattern, makes it really easy for us to see what's happening. So there's some other common, or maybe not so common, ways that you might see this code being implemented here. So here's some user input, and in this situation, as I mentioned earlier, it can be really convenient to use a while loop when you're not sure where your code's going to shut off. But you could do it with a for loop. So we could run this code here and see what's happening. Control-Shift-F will format, and we will Control-S to save, Control-F11 to run. What should I do? And then if I type quit by itself, it gets out and I finally quit the loop structure. So basically what this for loop is doing is running and executing over and over and over again until you type in quit. So this structure is not really recommended. This is something that's much better served inside of a while loop structure. So some common things to do would be to traverse or travel through a collection of items, and sometimes and most often this would be done with something like an array list, or a map, and we'll learn a lot more about collections and how for loops play with those. But for now, since we're comfortable with strings, we can iterate through or traverse through a string. And let's say we have a name and the name is Ohio. And it's really common practice for us to use the letter I for index within our for loop structure. So we'll have an index value starting at 0, which would be the first letter of the string. And we'll run through the length of the string. And let's print out the name dot character at position I. And what that's going to do is print out each character within our string. So what we're basically doing here is doing a string traversal where we print one letter at a time. And there is our string Ohio printed with one character on each different print line output. All right, we could try to reverse this. And in order to do that, we just, where are we at? Where are we going and how do we get there? Well, we are at the very last position of the string. And we can count here, right? 0, 1, 2, 3. So let's say we're at position 3. And as long as I is greater than or equal to 0, I minus minus, we're going to go backwards. Let's print the character at position I. Like I forgot a semicolon there. All right. And notice that we went backwards with Ohio here after we went through the line by line. So we've done two different demonstrations there. Now you'd probably want to make this a little bit more flexible depending on the word that's coming from the variable. So what we can do here is do name.length minus 1. And remember, the very last character of a string is always the length of the string minus 1. So this is a 4-letter word. That very last character is at position 3, because we start a string with the very first letter being at position 0. So this gives us the same result. And so traversing a collection, traversing a string, which is a collection of characters, this is something really popular to do with a for loop, because you would know the ending position is always at length minus 1. Or the starting position is at 0, the ending position is at length. You reverse it, the starting position is always length minus 1, the ending position is always 0. So the thing is, you know where you're starting, you know where you're ending when you're dealing with a collection, and that's going to be based on the size or the length of that collection. So a really popular scenario to use a for loop. There's a little demonstration of some optional items within a for loop. Not really common to see that. In that case, it's probably just better to use the while loop to do what you're doing. The while loop will reduce the cognitive load on other folks trying to figure out what it is that you're intending to do with your code. So when it's appropriate, for loops are usually easier to read. Really a good practice to use a for loop if you know the starting and ending position of your loop structure. If you're not really sure where it's going to end, you may be basing this on user input, much better to use a while loop.